Take it off. Right now and call the police. Rachel's fingers tightened around my wrist before I even realized what she was staring at. Her voice so low it barely rose above the hum of the coffee machine, but something in the way she said it made my stomach drop instantly, like I had just missed a step on a staircase I didn't see coming. And for a second I couldn't even process her words because my eyes were still fixed on the sleek black smartwatch wrapped around my wrist, the one my husband had clasped there just last night with a soft smile and a quiet, almost tender promise that it would keep me safe. And now Rachel was looking at it like it was something dangerous, something wrong, something I shouldn't even be touching. What? I whispered back, my voice catching in my throat as the overhead fluorescent lights flickered slightly above us, casting everything in that pale, sterile glow that suddenly made the office feel colder than it had a minute ago. But Rachel didn't answer right away, her eyes still locked on the screen as it lit up again without me touching it. A faint vibration pulsing against my skin, subtle but unmistakable, and that was when my phone buzzed in my pocket, sharp and sudden, making me flinch. I pulled it out almost automatically, and the moment I read the message my chest tightened. "Why did you stop moving?" it said, from Ethan, my husband, sent just seconds ago. And I felt something inside me shift, something small but heavy, like a quiet crack forming in the middle of something I had always believed was solid, because I hadn't told him I was in the break room, I hadn't texted him anything at all, I had just stepped away from my desk for coffee, the same way I did every morning. And yet somehow he knew. Rachel leaned closer, her voice even lower now, almost urgent. "This isn't normal," she said, her breath warm against my ear but her tone cold with certainty. "That interface. I've seen something like it before." I swallowed hard, my fingers hovering over the watch as it flickered again. A brief flash of something that didn't look like any normal app. Lines of data, tiny icons I didn't recognize, gone as quickly as they appeared. "It's just new," I said. Weakly, even as my pulse started to pick up. "He probably set it up last night." But even to me my voice sounded uncertain, like I was trying to convince myself more than her. Rachel shook her head slightly, her expression tightening. "No," she whispered. "That's not set up, that's tracking." The word hit me harder than I expected, like it had weight, like it belonged somewhere far away from my life, my marriage, my husband who kissed me on the forehead before work and reminded me to eat lunch. "You're overreacting," I said, but I couldn't stop staring at the watch, at the way it seemed to pulse faintly, alive in a way it shouldn't be. And then my phone buzzed again, louder this time, another message from Ethan. "You're not at your desk anymore." My breath caught, sharp and shallow. And for the first time that morning, the thought slipped in, quiet but undeniable. How does he know that? Rachel's grip on my wrist tightened again, not enough to hurt, but enough to anchor me, to pull me out of the spiral starting to form in my head. "Listen to me," she said, her eyes finally meeting mine, serious, steady, and a little scared. "This isn't a gift." And in that moment, standing there under those cold office lights with the watch still vibrating softly against my skin and my husband's messages lighting up my phone one after another, I realized something was very, very wrong. Last night felt so normal that it almost hurts to think about it now, like looking at a photograph where everything is perfect but you already know something is wrong just outside the frame. It was around 9:30 when Ethan came home, the soft click of the front door unlocking followed by his familiar footsteps across the hardwood floor, steady and unhurried, and I remember calling out from the kitchen, asking if he wanted dinner warmed up, and he answered the way he always did, calm, gentle, like nothing in the world could ever disturb that tone. "I grabbed something on the way, but thank you," he said, setting his keys down in that same ceramic bowl by the entryway, the one we bought together years ago at a weekend market. And for a moment everything felt exactly the same as it had always been, safe, predictable, hours until he walked into the kitchen with that small black box in his hand, sleek and minimal, the kind of packaging that immediately tells you it is expensive. "I got you something," he said, and there was a softness in his expression that made me smile without even thinking. "You did not have to do that," I told him, but he just shook his head slightly, stepping closer. "I wanted to," he replied, his voice low, almost careful, and when I opened the box and saw the smartwatch resting inside, its screen dark and perfectly smooth, I remember feeling genuinely touched, because Ethan had always been like that, attentive in quiet ways, noticing the little things, like how I had complained a few weeks ago about losing track of time during long meetings or forgetting to charge my phone. "It is beautiful," I said, running my fingers lightly over the surface, and he watched me with that same calm smile, but there was something else there too, something I did not notice then, something I only remember now. stillness in his eyes like he was waiting for something. "Let me," he said, gently taking the watch from my hand before I could put it on myself, and I laughed a little, holding out my wrist, the kitchen lights warm and golden above us, casting soft shadows on the counter, and he carefully wrapped the band around my wrist, his fingers steady, precise, not rushed at all. "There," he said once it clicked into place, his thumb brushing lightly against my skin for just a second longer than necessary. "Now I can make sure you are safe when you are out late." I remember teasing him about that, telling him I was not a teenager and that Chicago was not as dangerous as he made it sound, but he did not laugh the way I expected. He just gave a small nod, almost serious. "Still," he said quietly, "it makes me feel better." And I did not question it, not then, because it sounded like concern, like love, and the rest of the night unfolded in that same calm rhythm. We watched a show on the couch, shared a bowl of popcorn, talked about work in that casual way couples do when nothing feels urgent or wrong. And every now and then I felt the watch vibrate lightly against my wrist, subtle, easy to ignore, and when I mentioned it, Ethan said it was probably just syncing updates, nothing unusual, and I believed him. Of course I did, because why would I not? He was my husband, the man I had trusted for years, the one who knew my routines, my habits, the one who always seemed to understand me without needing long explanations. And when we went to bed, he kissed my forehead the same way he always did, soft and familiar. "Good night," he whispered, and I fell asleep with that quiet sense of comfort I had come to depend on, never once imagining that by morning, something as simple as that watch on my wrist would make everything I thought I knew about him feel uncertain, fragile, and dangerously incomplete. The rest of that morning began to unravel in small, almost invisible ways, the kind you could easily ignore if you wanted to believe everything was still normal. I sat at my desk around 10:15, the soft clicking of keyboards and distant phone calls filling the open office space, and for a while I tried to focus on a project timeline pulled up on my laptop, but the watch kept pulling my attention back, a faint vibration every few minutes, not strong enough to be alarming but persistent, enough to feel intentional, like a quiet tap on the shoulder that would not stop, and each time the screen lit up it showed something different, sometimes a blank notification, sometimes a flicker of icons I did not recognize, once even a brief flash of what looked like a map before it disappeared again, too quickly for me to fully register. I told myself it had to be a software glitch, maybe Ethan had installed something new or it needed an update, but the longer it continued, the harder it became to ignore the pattern forming in my mind, because around 10:23 my phone buzzed again, another message from Ethan. "Busy morning?" And I stared at the screen for a second before typing back a simple, "Yes, just meetings." But even as I sent it, a strange feeling settled in my chest, like I was answering a question he already knew the answer to. A few minutes later the watch vibrated again, sharper this time, and when I glanced down it showed a notification that disappeared the moment I tried to tap it, and almost immediately my phone buzzed once more. "You are in a meeting now?" And my fingers froze above the keyboard, because I had just stepped into a small conference room less than 30 seconds earlier. I had not told anyone, I had not even had time to sit down properly. And yet there it was, another message, another precise observation, and suddenly the room felt too quiet, too closed in, the air conditioning humming faintly above me as if it had grown louder, my heartbeat picking up in a way I could not quite control. I typed back slower this time, "Yes, quick check-in." And as I hit send, I found myself glancing toward the glass walls of the room, half expecting to see him standing there watching, but of course there was nothing, just coworkers passing by, completely unaware. And that should have reassured me, but it did not, because now the thought had already taken root. How does he know this? I tried to shake it off, telling myself he could have guessed. Maybe he knew my schedule, maybe it was coincidence, but the logic felt thin, fragile, like it could break with the slightest pressure. And the watch vibrated again, softer this time, almost like a pulse, and when I looked down for just a fraction of a second, I saw it clearly, a small green dot moving across a faint grid. Then it vanished, replaced by the normal watch face as if nothing had happened. My throat tightened, I swallowed hard, and for a moment I just sat there, staring at my own reflection in the glass, trying to steady my breathing, because suddenly all the small things from the past few weeks began to line up in my mind. Ethan knowing when I left work early one day, asking why I stopped at a coffee shop I had not mentioned, texting me at exact moments that matched where I was, and at the time I had laughed it off, calling him intuitive, attentive, almost joking that he must have some kind of sixth sense, but sitting there now with the watch still wrapped tightly around my wrist, it did not feel like intuition anymore. It felt like something else entirely, something precise, something intentional. And as my phone buzzed again with another message, "You have been quiet for a few Minutes. I felt a cold, creeping realization begin to form, slow but undeniable, that whatever this was, it had already been happening long before I ever noticed it. By 11:30 I could no longer pretend it was nothing. The pattern had become too precise, too deliberate, and every time the watch vibrated my chest tightened a little more, like my body was reacting before my mind could fully catch up. I stepped out of the conference room with my laptop still open in my hand, trying to look normal as I walked back toward my desk, but my focus was gone, completely gone. Every sound in the office suddenly felt sharper. The distant ringing of a phone, the low murmur of conversations, the soft whir of the air conditioning vents, all of it pressing in on me while that steady, subtle pulse from my wrist refused to let me forget it was there. I sat down and stared at the screen in front of me without really seeing it, my thoughts looping back to the same question over and over. How does he know? And just as that thought formed again, my phone buzzed. You are back at your desk now. And this time I did not even try to respond, I just stared at the message, my fingers resting motionless on the keyboard, my heart beating faster than it should have for something that still did not have a clear explanation. And that was when Rachel appeared beside my desk, her footsteps quick but controlled, like she was trying not to draw attention. Hey, can you help me with something in the pantry? She asked casually, her tone light enough that anyone nearby would think nothing of it, but the moment I looked up at her, I saw it again, that same tension. In her expression, the same urgency behind her eyes. I nodded without speaking and followed her, my legs feeling strangely unsteady as we walked. The distance was not more than 30 feet, but it felt longer, like every step carried more weight than it should. And as soon as we stepped into the pantry, she closed the door halfway, not fully shut, just enough to give us a sliver of privacy. The fluorescent lights above us hummed softly, casting that cold, flat glow across the countertops and stainless steel appliances, and for a second neither of us spoke. She just looked at my wrist again, her jaw tightening slightly. Let me see it, she said quietly, and I hesitated, not because I did not want to, but because something inside me resisted, like handing it over would somehow confirm what I was starting to fear. But I lifted my wrist anyway, holding it out toward her, and as she leaned closer, the watch vibrated again, a small, deliberate pulse, the screen lighting up with a flicker that lasted just long enough for her to catch it. Her breath hitched slightly, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. That is not standard, she murmured, more to herself than to me, her fingers hovering just above the screen but not touching it, like she did not want to trigger anything. What do you mean? I asked, my voice lower now, tighter, and she glanced up at me, her expression serious in a way that made my stomach drop again. My sister went through something like this, she said, choosing her words carefully. Her ex installed tracking software on her devices, stuff that looks normal on the surface but runs deeper, hidden layers, remote access, location logs, sometimes even audio triggers. Each word felt heavier than the last, settling into my chest like stones, and I shook my head, slightly instinctively. No, Ethan would not do that, I said quickly, almost too quickly, and even as the words left my mouth, I felt how fragile they sounded. Rachel did not argue, she did not push, she just looked back at the watch as it pulsed again, and then she said quietly, the same sentence that had started this whole moment but now carried even more weight, more certainty. You need to take it off. I swallowed, my throat dry, my fingers moving toward the clasp, but as soon as I touched it, my phone buzzed again, louder this time, more insistent, and when I looked down at the screen my heart dropped. Why are you touching the watch? I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, silent rush, my hand freezing mid-motion, and for the first time since this started, the fear was no longer vague or distant. It was immediate, sharp, and impossible to ignore, because whatever this was, it was not guessing anymore, it was watching. My fingers stayed frozen on the clasp, not because I could not move, but because something deeper stopped me, something instinctive that told me the moment I made the wrong move, something would change, and not in a way I could control. The watch sat against my skin, warm now, almost like it had a presence of its own, and my phone screen glowed in my other hand with that message still staring back at me. Why are you touching the watch? And for a second I could not even breathe properly, my chest tightening as if the air had thinned around me. Rachel saw it immediately, the way my expression shifted, the way my shoulders stiffened. What did he say? She asked quietly, and I did not answer right away. I just turned the phone slightly so she could read it herself. Her eyes moved quickly across the screen, and I saw the exact moment it confirmed everything she had been thinking. Her lips pressed together, her jaw setting tighter. Okay, she said under her breath, calm but firm. We are not doing this here. She glanced toward the half-open door, then back at me. You need to act normal? I nodded slowly, even though nothing felt normal anymore, my hand still hovering near the watch like I had forgotten how to move it naturally. Do not take it off yet, she added, her voice steady but urgent. If he is watching in real time, he will know something is wrong. That sentence landed heavily. Real time, the words echoed in my head, making everything feel sharper, more immediate, like there was no safe delay between what I did and what he could see. I swallowed hard and forced my hand to drop casually to my side, trying to mimic the way I would normally stand, even though my heart was pounding too fast for it to feel convincing. Just leave it? I whispered, and she gave a small nod. For now, she said. We need to understand how deep this goes. The watch vibrated again, softer this time, and I flinched before I could stop myself, my body reacting faster than my mind, and that reaction alone made my pulse spike higher, because if I could feel it this clearly, then whatever was on the other side of it was not passive, it was active, engaged, aware. I glanced down again, the screen lighting up. Just briefly, enough for me to catch another flicker of that same strange interface, lines shifting, something updating, and then it was gone, replaced by the clean, simple watch face as if nothing had ever happened. We need to check your phone, Rachel said quietly, already moving closer, her voice dropping even lower. If that thing is connected, it is not working alone. I hesitated for half a second, then unlocked my phone and handed it to her. My fingers trembling slightly as I did. She moved quickly, opening settings, scanning through permissions, connections, accounts, her expression growing more focused with each second. Here, she murmured, tilting the screen toward me just enough to show a list of linked devices. And there it was, something I did not recognize, a device labeled with a generic name that did not match anything I owned. My stomach tightened. That was not there before, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and Rachel nodded. Exactly, she replied, her tone calm but certain. And look at this. She scrolled further, opening another section, revealing a background process running continuously, something with access to location, microphone, and data usage. My throat went dry as I read it, each permission stacking on top of the last until the pattern became impossible to deny. Location tracking, audio input, continuous sync. I felt a slow, cold wave spread through me, starting in my chest and moving outward, because this was no longer just a strange watch or a glitch or a misunderstanding. This was something built, something intentional, something designed to follow me, listen to me, map me. And the realization settled in with a quiet, heavy weight. This had not started today. This had been there, hidden, running in the background of my life while I went about my days believing everything was normal. And somewhere on the other side of it, Ethan had been watching, not guessing, not assuming, but knowing every step, every pause, every moment I thought was mine alone. The realization did not come all at once. It built slowly, piece by piece, like something assembling itself in the background while I was still trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Rachel continued scrolling through my phone with steady hands, her focus sharp, methodical, while I stood there barely moving, aware of every small sensation, the cool air against my skin, the faint hum of electricity in the walls, the constant presence of the watch against my wrist. And then she stopped, her finger hovering over a hidden folder buried deeper than any normal app should be. This is not something a regular user installs, she said quietly, opening it, and what appeared on the screen made my breath catch in a way I could not control. Logs, timestamps, precise entries tracking movement down to the minute, locations mapped with exact coordinates, even small notes attached to certain times, like someone had been observing patterns, documenting them. I leaned closer without realizing it, my eyes scanning the entries, trying to make sense of them, until one line stopped me completely. Yesterday, 6:42 p.m., coffee shop on West Adams Street, stayed for 18 minutes. I felt my chest tighten instantly, because I had not told Ethan about that stop. It had been spontaneous, something I decided on the way home just to clear my head. And yet here it was, recorded, exact, undeniable. This is not just tracking, Rachel murmured, her voice lower now, heavier. This is behavioral logging. The words echoed in my mind, not just where I was but how I moved, what I did, how long I stayed, and suddenly the pattern shifted into something even more unsettling. This was not passive observation, this was analysis. I scrolled further with trembling fingers, unable to stop myself. More entries appeared, days, weeks, even months back, places I had forgotten, moments I barely remembered, all of it documented with a level of precision that felt almost impossible. And then another detail stood out, small at first, but impossible to ignore once I saw it. Certain entries were grouped together, labeled, categorized under a single name I recognized instantly: Daniel Carter, a coworker from my office. My stomach dropped hard, because the entries connected to his name showed every time I had been near him, meetings, hallway conversations, even a quick exchange by the elevator that had lasted less than 2 minutes, all of it logged, tracked, highlighted. My mind raced, trying to understand why, trying to find a reason that made sense, but nothing about this felt rational anymore. He is building something, Rachel said softly, almost like she did not want to say it out loud. A pattern, a narrative? I shook my head slowly, the movement barely there because I did not want to believe it. I could not, but the evidence was right in front of me, structured, organized, intentional. This was not about curiosity or concern, this was preparation. My phone buzzed again in my hand, the sudden vibration making me flinch. Another message from Ethan. You have been in the pantry for 6 minutes. My breath caught. 6 minutes, he was counting, measuring time down to the minute, and then another message appeared immediately after. Who are you with? My fingers went cold, my grip tightening around the phone as a wave of something heavier than fear settled over me, something sharper, clearer, because this was no longer just about being watched, it was about being studied, analyzed, reduced to data points and patterns, and somewhere on the other side of all of this, Ethan was not just observing my life, he was constructing a version of it, one that I had no control over, one that could be used, shaped, and possibly turned against me. And as that thought fully formed, something inside me shifted, because for the first time since this began, the question was no longer what is happening, it was what is he planning to do with it. The question lingered in the air between us, heavy and unavoidable, and for a moment neither of us spoke, the hum of the fluorescent lights above us suddenly sounding louder than before, almost like a low warning I could not ignore. Rachel slowly locked my phone and handed it back to me, her movements controlled but deliberate, like she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. We need to assume he can see and hear more than we think, she said quietly, her eyes meeting mine with a seriousness that made my chest tighten again. I nodded without hesitation this time because there was no part of me left that could deny it, not after what I had just seen, not after the way every detail of my day had been recorded like I was part of some system instead of my own life. My phone buzzed again in my hand, another message. You have not answered me. And I felt a sharp tension run through my shoulders instinctively, automatically, like my body was already reacting to him before I even decided what to do. You need to respond, Rachel said softly. Keep it normal, nothing changes. I swallowed hard and typed back slowly, forcing my fingers to move at a steady pace even though my thoughts were racing. Just grabbing coffee with Rachel. I hit send and immediately regretted how specific it sounded, but it was too late. The message delivered instantly, and we both watched the screen in silence for a few seconds that felt much longer than they should have. Then the reply came, faster than I expected. Okay. Just that, one word, simple, neutral. But something about it made my stomach twist because it felt too controlled, too measured, like he was adjusting to the information rather than reacting to it. Rachel exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping just slightly. Good, she murmured. That buys us a little time. I glanced back down at the watch, the screen dark again, quiet, almost innocent, and the contrast made it worse somehow, because now I knew what was underneath that surface. What do we do? I asked, my voice lower now, steadier than I felt. Rachel hesitated for a second, then leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. We document everything, she said. And we talk to someone who knows how to handle this, someone official. The word official landed with weight because it meant this was no longer something private, no longer something I could just figure out on my own. It meant involving people, exposing what was happening, making it real in a way that could not be undone. I glanced toward the door again, half expecting it to open, half expecting something to interrupt this fragile moment. But the hallway outside looked the same as always, coworkers passing by, completely unaware that my entire sense of normal had just shifted. I have a cousin, Rachel continued quietly. He works in law enforcement, not here but close enough. He can at least tell us what this is and what your options are. I nodded slowly, the idea settling in, grounding me just enough to keep moving forward. Okay, I said, my voice barely more than a breath, and then my phone buzzed again, sharper this time, another message from Ethan. When are you leaving work today? My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, and something about the question felt different now, not casual, not routine, but purposeful, like he was not just tracking where I was, but planning what came next. I looked at Rachel, and she saw it immediately, the shift in my expression, the tension returning. Answer like you always would, she said softly, and I nodded, typing carefully. Around 5, same as usual. I sent it, and for a second there was no response, just silence, but it was not the kind of silence that felt safe. It was the kind that felt like something was being decided somewhere I could not see. And as I stood there with the watch still wrapped around my wrist and my phone still warm in my hand, I realized something else, something that made the air feel even thinner. Whatever Ethan was building, whatever he was planning, it was not finished yet, and that meant I was still inside it. The rest of the afternoon moved in a strange, stretched rhythm, like time had slowed down but everything inside me was speeding up. Every glance at the clock felt heavier, every vibration from the watch sharper, more deliberate, and I forced myself to return to my desk, to open my laptop, to move my mouse and type like nothing had changed, even though everything had. Rachel stayed close but not too close, careful not to draw attention, occasionally passing by my desk like it was routine, her eyes meeting mine just long enough to remind me I was not alone in this, but the weight of it all still sat on my shoulders, constant and pressing. My phone remained face down beside my keyboard, but I could feel it, like I was waiting for it to light up again, for another message that would confirm he was still watching, still measuring, still building whatever version of my life he had created in his mind. Around 2:15 I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. Without pretending, the hallway felt longer than usual, the sound of my own footsteps echoing slightly against the tile, and once I was inside, I locked myself into a stall, leaning back against the door, closing my eyes for just a second, trying to steady my breathing, but even there, even in that small enclosed space, I could not escape the awareness of the watch on my wrist. It felt heavier now, not physically but mentally, like it carried something with it that I could not see but could not ignore. I lifted my wrist slowly, staring at the dark screen, and for a moment I considered ripping it off right there, just pulling it free and leaving it behind, but Rachel's words echoed in my mind, "Do not change anything yet," and I hesitated, my fingers hovering again, the same way they had earlier, caught between instinct and caution. My phone buzzed again, the sound sharp in the quiet space, and I pulled it out quickly, my heart already racing before I even saw the message. "You stepped away." It read, simple, direct, and the air in the stall felt suddenly thinner. I swallowed hard and typed back with hands that were steadier than I felt. "Just a quick break." I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting, counting the seconds without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, and then the reply came, "Okay." Again that same controlled response, that same calm tone that now felt more unsettling than reassuring. I slid my phone back into my pocket and leaned my head back against the door, staring up at the ceiling, the fluorescent light flickering faintly above me. And for the first time since this started, a different kind of thought formed, not confusion, not disbelief, but clarity. Whatever Ethan was doing, he was not improvising. This was planned, structured, something he had built over time, and that meant he had an endpoint in mind, something he was working toward. I pushed myself upright and unlocked the stall, washing my hands slowly at the sink, watching my reflection in the mirror, trying to recognize the version of myself staring back, because just hours ago, I had walked into work thinking about deadlines and meetings, and now I was standing there calculating my movements, my words, my timing, like every action mattered in a way it never had before. When I stepped back into the hallway, my phone buzzed once more, and this time the message was different, shorter but heavier. "Do not stay late today." I stopped walking for a second, my breath catching just slightly, because that was not a question, not a casual check-in, it was a direction, clear and intentional. And as I stood there with the watch still wrapped around my wrist and the message still glowing on my screen, one thought settled in with quiet certainty: whatever was waiting at the end of today, he was expecting me to be there. By 4:58, every second felt deliberate, like it was being measured somewhere I could not see. I shut down my laptop slowly, forcing my movements to stay consistent with every other day. Even though nothing about this day had been normal, the office around me began to thin out as people packed up, chairs rolling back, quiet goodbyes exchanged, the familiar rhythm of the workday ending, and I followed it, standing, gathering my bag, slipping my phone into my coat pocket while keeping my wrist steady, aware of the watch in a way that had never crossed my mind before. Rachel passed by one last time, her voice low as she leaned just slightly closer. "I will text you as soon as I speak to him," she said, meaning her cousin, and I nodded without looking at her directly, maintaining the appearance of routine, but inside everything felt tightly wound, like a spring pulled too far. I walked toward the elevator, the soft chime echoing as the doors opened, a few coworkers stepping in. Beside me, casual conversations filling the small space, and I stood there silently, my reflection faint in the mirrored wall, watching my own expression, trying to keep it neutral, steady, unaware. The watch vibrated once, a soft pulse that felt louder than it should, and I did not look at it, not this time. I kept my gaze forward as the elevator descended floor by floor, each number lighting up in sequence, And when the doors finally opened to the lobby, I stepped out into the cooler air, the glass doors sliding open as I moved toward the street. Chicago in the late afternoon felt exactly as it always did. Traffic moving steadily, people crossing intersections, the distant sound of a siren blending into the background, and for a moment, the normalcy of it all felt almost unreal, like I was stepping into a scene that had nothing to do with what I now knew was happening. My phone buzzed again, and this time I did look. Heading home? The message read simple, casual, but I could feel the weight behind it now. I typed back, keeping my tone even. Yes, just leaving now. I sent it and slipped the phone back into my pocket, my steps steady as I walked toward the parking structure. 2 blocks away, the familiar route feeling unfamiliar now, like every corner had meaning, every movement part of something larger. I reached my car, unlocked it, and sat inside for a moment without starting the engine, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my breathing slower now, more controlled, because somewhere between fear and clarity, something had shifted again. I was no longer reacting, I was aware, and that awareness carried its own kind of weight. My phone buzzed once more, and I glanced down expecting another simple check-in, but the message was different this time, shorter, colder. Good? I stared at it for a second longer than I meant to because there was no question in it, no curiosity, just confirmation, like something had aligned exactly the way it was supposed to. I started the engine and pulled out slowly, merging into traffic, the city lights beginning to glow as the sky dimmed, and as I drove I could feel it clearly now, not just the watch on my wrist, not just the messages on my phone, but the presence of something else, something built from all those logs, all those patterns, all those silent observations, something that existed outside of me but was made entirely from me. And as I turned onto the street leading toward my house, one final realization settled in with quiet certainty. Whatever Ethan believed he had created, whatever story he had constructed from every step I took and every moment I lived, tonight was the moment he expected it to become real. And for the first time since this began, I understood something else just as clearly. I was